You can have the title, the office, and the authority that comes with being the leader, but without trust, none of it really matters. Because leadership without trust is like steering a ship with no compass. You might move fast, but you'll always be lost. Trust is the invisible currency that keeps teams together, that fuels innovation, that makes people believe in a vision even when the odds are against them. But here's the truth. Few leaders admit earning trust isn't easy, and keeping it is even harder. Every leader faces a moment when the team begins to question silently, do I really believe in this person? It's not always said out loud, but you can feel it. The energy changes, the room grows quieter, people stop volunteering ideas, they nod but don't commit, they listen but don't engage, and that's when leadership becomes lonely, not because others leave your side, but because they stop believing in your direction. You might think trust comes from charisma, from giving great speeches, or making people like you. But real trust doesn't come from words. It comes from behavior, from how you show up when things go wrong, from how you treat people when no one is watching, from whether your team feels safe to tell you the truth, even when that truth hurts. Because when your team fears your reaction more than they believe in your leadership, you've already lost them. Think about the leaders you've admired in your own life. They weren't perfect. They made mistakes, but they owned them. They were steady. You could predict who they would be, even in chaos. That predictability, that consistency is what breeds trust. People will forgive your errors, but they won't forgive your inconsistency. The moment you start breaking your own word, people stop listening to it. The pain of leadership without trust doesn't happen overnight. It creeps in slowly. It begins when you say you'll follow up, but don't. When you promise transparency, but hold back the truth. When you ask your team for feedback, but punish honesty. Each small act chips away at the foundation until one day you look around and realize the team isn't with you anymore. They're still there physically, but emotionally they've checked out. And that's the worst kind of silence a leader can face. Trust is fragile because it's emotional. It's built on how people feel around you. Safe or scared, valued or dismissed, included or ignored. And every conversation, every action, every reaction adds or subtracts from that emotional bank account. You can't fake it. You can't demand it. You can only earn it moment by moment. And when it's gone, even the best strategy or vision won't bring your team back. The truth is, people don't quit jobs. They quit leaders they can't trust. They stop following those whose words sound strong, but whose actions fall short. And when that happens, even the most talented teams fall apart, not because of lack of skill, but because of lack of belief. Leadership is not about control. It's about credibility. It's not about being right. It's about being real. When your team believes in your integrity, they'll follow you through uncertainty, through failure, through storms, but without that belief, even success feels hollow. Because leadership without trust is like speaking to an audience whose hearts are already gone. You're talking, but no one's really listening. And that, more than anything else, is the quiet heartbreak of leadership. Trust. It's one of those words we hear so often that we forget how powerful it truly is. We talk about it in meetings, in relationships, in leadership workshops, but few leaders ever stop to ask themselves, what does trust really mean to my team, to my people, to me? Because trust isn't a slogan you hang on a wall or a line you add to your mission statement. Trust is behavior. It's the daily rhythm of your leadership, the small, consistent moments that either build people up or quietly tear them down. When people trust you, they don't just follow your words, they follow your intentions. They believe in your motives, even when they don't understand your decisions. They give you the benefit of the doubt because you've earned it through your consistency. But when that trust is missing, every word you say becomes suspect. Every action is questioned. Every decision feels like it has a hidden agenda behind it. And once that happens, leadership becomes a game of defense instead of progress. Trust isn't about being perfect. It's about being predictable in your principles. People don't expect you to have all the answers. They just need to know who you'll be when things go wrong. They need to know that you'll be honest when the truth is uncomfortable. They need to see that you'll own your mistakes instead of hiding them behind excuses. Because when you're predictable in your values, people feel safe to take risks, speak up, and give their best. You see, trust lives in the space between words and actions. It's in that gap where people measure your authenticity. If your actions consistently align with your promises, that gap closes and trust grows. But when there's a disconnect, even a small one, people start to doubt. They start to wonder which version of you they're going to get today. The one who listens or the one who dismisses, the one who encourages or the one who blames. That uncertainty is the beginning of mistrust. And once doubt enters the room, it spreads faster than truth can catch up. The heart of trust is credibility. And credibility is built on two things: competence and character. Competence means you can deliver. You know what you're doing, and people respect your ability. But character, that's deeper. Character is about integrity, empathy, and humility. It's about doing the right thing even when it's inconvenient, because you can be competent and still lose your team if they don't believe in your character. People may respect your skill, but they'll only follow your heart if they trust your values. Think about how easily trust can be lost. One broken promise, one moment of dishonesty, one instance where you put personal comfort above team commitment. It doesn't take much. And when people feel betrayed, even slightly, they don't just lose faith in the leader. They start protecting themselves. They share less. They collaborate less. They start building walls instead of bridges. And those walls are made of silence, avoidance, and doubt. But here's the thing. Trust isn't just built through grand gestures or heroic acts. It's built in the micro moments, the everyday choices that most leaders overlook. It's when you return a call you promised to make, when you acknowledge a mistake before anyone points it out, when you give credit where it's due, when you listen without interrupting. These are the moments that define your credibility far more than your speeches ever will. Leaders often underestimate the emotional dimension of trust. They think it's about performance or results, but trust is emotional currency. It's how safe people feel in your presence. When people trust you, they're not afraid to bring you bad news. They're not afraid to challenge your ideas. They're not afraid to fail because they know you'll guide them, not judge them. But when trust is absent, fear takes over, and fear is the silent killer of creativity, collaboration, and commitment. Real trust creates psychological safety. That deep sense of assurance that it's okay to be honest, to disagree, to try and fail. And that safety comes from leadership that is steady, transparent, and human. Not perfect, human. Leaders who are open about their own learning, who admit when they don't know something, who celebrate progress instead of pretending to be flawless. Those are the leaders people believe in, because authenticity builds bridges that authority never can. There's also a subtle but crucial difference between trusting someone's intentions and trusting their consistency. A leader may have the best intentions in the world, but if their behavior keeps shifting, if their promises keep changing, people can't rely on them. And without reliability, trust collapses. People might like you, but they won't follow you when it matters most. True trust comes from alignment, when your intentions, words, and actions all move in the same direction, no matter the pressure. Another overlooked aspect of trust is communication. Trust thrives in the light but dies in silence. When leaders go quiet, people start filling in the blanks, and those blanks are almost always filled with fear or assumptions. That's why consistent, honest communication, especially in uncertainty, is so critical. It doesn't mean sharing every detail. It means being transparent about what you know, what you don't know, and what you're doing to find out. When people feel included in the truth, they feel respected, and respect is the soil where trust grows. Empathy is also the heartbeat of trust. When people feel seen, heard, and valued, they naturally lower their guard. They stop viewing you as the boss and start seeing you as someone who genuinely cares. Empathy isn't about agreeing with everyone. It's about understanding them. When you listen deeply, when you try to see the world through their eyes, you create a bond that no authority can replace. Because people don't just want to be led, they want to be understood. And then there's accountability, the quiet twin of trust. Accountability means you hold yourself to the same standards you expect from others. When your team sees you owning your mistakes, honoring commitments, and following through, they realize they can trust not only your leadership, but your integrity. Nothing builds credibility faster than a leader who leads by example, and nothing destroys it faster than a leader who says one thing but does another. Trust also requires time. It's not something you can rush or demand. You can't walk into a room and declare, "Trust me." Trust doesn't respond to words. It responds to evidence. Every action you take is a deposit or withdrawal in your trust account. Some leaders try to buy trust with incentives or authority, but people are too smart for that. They don't trust you because of your title. They trust you because of your truth. And when that trust becomes mutual, when it flows both ways, leadership becomes effortless. Your team starts taking ownership. They anticipate your needs. They protect the mission because they believe in the person leading it. That's when leadership transforms from managing tasks to inspiring transformation. In the end, trust isn't built in meetings or memos. It's built in conversations, in consistency, and in character. It's about how you show up day after day when no one's clapping. Because the real measure of a leader isn't how loud they can speak. It's how deeply people believe them when they do. Trust is earned slowly, quietly, and intentionally. It's not a moment, it's a mindset. And when it's real, it becomes the most valuable leadership currency there is, because everything great in leadership begins and ends with trust. A few years ago, I worked closely with a CEO who had once been celebrated as a rising star in his industry, a brilliant strategist, a charismatic speaker, and someone who could inspire a room in seconds. His company had grown fast, but somewhere along the way, the culture began to shift. What was once a place filled with innovation and excitement had turned quiet, cautious, and disconnected. The numbers still looked decent on paper, but something deeper had broken, the bond of trust between the leader and his people. It didn't happen overnight. It never does. In the early years, he was hands-on, transparent, and approachable. He would walk the floors, listen to new ideas, and celebrate small wins. People loved working for him because they felt seen. But as the company expanded, pressure mounted, investors, board expectations, competition. Slowly, he began retreating behind closed doors. Meetings became shorter, decisions became top-down, promises made in team gatherings were often forgotten, delayed, or contradicted by later choices. Employees who had once been outspoken became quiet. They stopped offering suggestions. They stopped believing their voices mattered. By the time I was called in, morale had cratered. Employees weren't leaving in waves, but emotionally, they had already checked out. They showed up to do their jobs, but the fire was gone. You could feel it in the hallways, that uneasy silence that follows disappointment. When I asked team members privately what they thought of their CEO, one said something that summed it up perfectly. "We respect his talent, but we don't trust his word anymore." That one sentence cut through everything. Respect without trust is like applause without belief. It sounds good from a distance, but means nothing up close. The CEO was devastated when he heard the feedback. He had no idea it had gotten that bad. "But I've done everything I can," he said. "I've worked harder than ever. I've been trying to fix things." And that was true. He had been working harder, but he had been working alone. In trying to solve every problem himself, he had accidentally pushed his people away. He thought being strong meant carrying the weight in silence, but to his team, that silence felt like distance. We started small. Rebuilding trust isn't about grand gestures. It's about honest, consistent effort. I asked him to start with something simple, to talk to his team, not at them, so he called a meeting. But this time, he didn't walk in with a presentation or a strategy. He walked in with humility. He started by saying, "I know I've lost some of your trust. I've made mistakes. I've been distant, and I want to fix that, not through words, but through actions." The room went silent. You could feel the tension. For a few moments, no one said a word. But then someone spoke up. "What's going to be different this time?" It wasn't a challenge, it was a plea. That question changed everything, because instead of defending himself, the CEO simply said, "You tell me, what would make it different?" What followed was raw, uncomfortable, and transformative. For the next 2 hours, team members spoke, honestly, sometimes painfully, about what they needed to see, what had hurt them, and what they hoped could change. Some spoke about broken promises. Others spoke about feeling invisible. There were moments of silence, even tears, but through it all, the CEO listened. Not to respond, not to justify, but to understand. In the days that followed, he began to take visible action. He started weekly open sessions, no agenda, no presentation, where anyone could join and ask questions directly. He stopped hiding behind carefully filtered updates and started sharing the truth, even when it wasn't flattering. When there were delays, he admitted them. When a mistake happened, he owned it publicly. Slowly, the atmosphere began to shift. At first, people were skeptical. They'd heard promises before, but he didn't get defensive about that skepticism. He respected it. He understood that trust couldn't be demanded. It had to be rebuilt brick by brick. Over the next few months, consistency became his mission. If he said he would do something on Monday, it was done by Friday. If someone raised a concern, he followed up personally. When his executives disagreed, he didn't shut them down. He invited their perspectives. One of the most powerful moments came when he made a public apology to the entire organization for a decision that had caused layoffs the previous year. He explained not just what happened, but why, and more importantly, what he had learned from it. It wasn't scripted, it was human. That moment changed how people saw him. He wasn't the unreachable CEO anymore. He was someone willing to stand in front of his people and take responsibility. The impact wasn't immediate, but it was real. In the months that followed, employees began to re-engage. Meetings became more honest. Teams started offering ideas again. Turnover slowed. Surveys showed rising trust scores. But the most telling sign was something you couldn't measure on paper. Laughter returned to the office. You could feel energy again. People started taking ownership, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The CEO didn't just rebuild his team's trust. He rebuilt his own understanding of leadership. He realized that leadership wasn't about being the smartest person in the room. It was about being the most dependable. It wasn't about inspiring people once. It was about earning their belief over and over again. He also learned that vulnerability doesn't weaken authority. It strengthens credibility. By being transparent about his shortcomings, he invited his team to bring their full selves to work, with honesty, flaws, and all. He stopped pretending to have every answer, and in doing so, he created space for collaboration. The more he opened up, the more his people stepped forward. They began solving problems before he even asked. Months later, when I walked back into that same company, the transformation was striking. The CEO was still busy, maybe even busier, but his presence felt different. He smiled more. His tone was calmer. His leadership had shifted from command to connection. He didn't have to control everything anymore because he finally trusted his people, and they trusted him back. What made the difference wasn't a leadership seminar or a motivational speech. It was the courage to face the truth, the humility to listen, and the consistency to follow through. Trust wasn't rebuilt through words on a wall. It was rebuilt through actions that matched those words day after day. And in the end, that CEO discovered something profound. People don't need perfect leaders. They need honest ones. They don't expect you to never fall. They just need to know that when you do, you'll stand up again and bring them with you. Because in leadership, the true power doesn't come from control. It comes from credibility. Rebuilding trust took him time, patience, and discomfort, but it gave him something far greater in return, a team that believed again. And once a team believes, there is no limit to what they can achieve together. Building trust and credibility as a leader isn't about mastering complex strategies or adopting the latest leadership trend. It's about returning to the fundamentals. It's about being the kind of person your team can count on, not just when things are easy, but especially when they're not. Trust is built on evidence, not intention. Every action, every conversation, every promise you keep or break shapes how people experience your leadership. So if you want to strengthen that foundation, start with the small things that make the biggest difference. The first step is consistency. Nothing creates stability in a team more than knowing exactly who you'll be each day. Consistency isn't about routine, it's about reliability. It means that your reactions, your values, and your decisions don't fluctuate based on pressure or convenience. When people see that your behavior aligns with your words, even in tough times, they begin to trust your integrity. Every time you follow through on what you say, you're making a silent deposit into your credibility bank. But each time you delay, deflect, or disappear, you make a withdrawal. Leaders who earn trust understand that credibility is cumulative, built one consistent act at a time. Next comes communication. Most trust issues don't stem from betrayal, they stem from silence. When people don't hear from their leaders, they fill the gaps with doubt and fear. Transparent communication isn't about oversharing, it's about clarity. It's about keeping your team informed, especially when things are uncertain. When you tell them the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, you earn respect. Honesty creates alignment. A simple phrase like, "Here's what I know and here's what I don't," is far more powerful than pretending you have every answer. Clear communication isn't just about speaking, it's about being understood. Then there's empathy. Empathy is not weakness, it's leadership strength. It's what turns authority into connection. When your team feels understood, they trust your direction. Listening, truly listening, is one of the fastest ways to build trust. Not to reply, not to defend, but to understand. When someone feels heard, they feel valued. And when they feel valued, they become loyal. Empathy builds emotional safety, the foundation of every high-performing team. It tells your people you matter here, your voice matters. That sense of belonging fuels trust more than any policy or incentive ever could. Finally, deliver results. Trust doesn't survive on good intentions alone, it needs proof. You can be kind, honest, and empathetic, but if your team doesn't see progress, trust will erode. Results are the evidence that your leadership works. They validate your credibility. But the key is not to chase results at the expense of integrity, it's to achieve them through consistency, communication, and care. People follow leaders who get things done, but they stay loyal to leaders who get things done the right way. Building trust is a daily practice, not a destination. It's not earned through a single moment of inspiration, but through 1,000 small choices that show your team who you are when no one's watching. You build it in how you listen, how you decide, how you lead through failure, and how you rise after it. Trust and credibility are not given. They're lived, proven, and reinforced through every action that reflects your word. Leadership is not about titles, corner offices, or authority. It's about belief. The true measure of a leader is not how many people follow them, but how deeply those people believe in them. Because when your team believes in you, they'll go further than they thought possible. Not for the paycheck, not for the applause, but because they trust your purpose. That's what real leadership does. It transforms effort into energy and energy into impact. But that belief, that loyalty, that unshakable bond, it doesn't appear overnight. It's earned through integrity in motion, through words that align with action, through decisions that reflect your values even when they cost you something. Every great leader has faced the crossroads, that quiet, defining moment where they must choose between what's easy and what's right. And it's in that moment that credibility is forged. You don't earn trust when things go perfectly. You earn it when you stand tall in uncertainty, when you take responsibility, when you show courage in vulnerability. That's when your team looks at you and thinks, this is someone I can believe in, because they've seen you lead with honesty when it mattered most. Trust, after all, isn't built in grand speeches. It's built in silent consistency. It's in showing up one more time after a mistake, in keeping a promise that no one remembered but you, in defending someone's effort when it would have been easier to criticize. The smallest act of integrity echoes louder than the most powerful words. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be real. People can forgive mistakes. What they won't forgive is pretending. Leadership, at its core, is service. It's choosing to put your people first. To lead not for recognition, but for responsibility. When you build trust, You give others permission to believe in something bigger than themselves. You ignite ownership. You create unity. And in that unity lies strength. Your words start to carry weight, not because of authority, but because of authenticity. People don't just follow your orders, they follow your example.